You know what's strange? There are people out there, fully grown adults, who have never once in their life heard the words, "Hey, are you okay?" Like, genuinely okay? And if someone actually asked them that right now, truly asked them, with no rush, no distraction, no phone in hand, they would probably cry. Not because something terrible just happened, but because no one has ever asked before. And maybe that person is you. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying it because research tells us it's far more common than we realize. There's a part inside a lot of people, a quiet, tucked away part, that has been waiting for comfort that never came. And over the years, that part didn't disappear. It just learned to be very, very small. It learned to not ask, to not need, to just keep going. And most people don't even know it's there anymore until something cracks it open. Let me tell you something that a lot of people recognize the moment they hear it. Think back to a time when you were younger, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, and something genuinely upset you. Not a dramatic trauma, just something that really got to you. Maybe you failed at something in front of others. Maybe someone said something that cut deep. Maybe you were scared or confused or just really, really sad. Now here's the question. When that happened, was there someone who sat with you, who didn't just say, "You'll be fine," and walk away, who actually stopped, looked at you, and said, "That sounds really hard. Tell me more"? For a lot of people, the honest answer is no. Not because their parents were monsters, not because no one cared, but because the adults around them were doing their best, carrying their own unprocessed pain, their own stress, their own emotional baggage they'd never been taught to unpack. So they did what they knew. They distracted. They minimized. They redirected. Stop crying. You're okay. Other kids have it worse. You're too sensitive. And you, small, impressionable, wiring your nervous system in real time, took that information in. And your brain filed it away as, "My feelings are too much. My needs are inconvenient. I should handle this myself." That filing, that's not nothing. That's the beginning of a pattern that a lot of people are still living inside of as adults. Dr. Daniel Siegel, a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA, has spent decades studying how early emotional experiences shape the brain. And one of the things his research consistently shows is that when children don't receive what he calls attunement, meaning when a caregiver doesn't emotionally mirror and validate what the child is feeling, it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It actually changes how the brain develops, specifically in the areas that regulate emotions, manage stress, and build the capacity for self-compassion. In simple terms, when nobody comforts you consistently as a child, you don't just miss out on feeling good. You literally don't develop the internal tools to comfort yourself later, because the brain learns by being shown. It's like trying to play piano without ever seeing anyone play piano. Nobody told you it was impossible. Nobody sat you down and said, "You'll never be able to do this." They just weren't there. And so the skill never got built. And then adulthood arrives, and the world expects you to be emotionally regulated, self-sufficient, capable of handling rejection, failure, grief, uncertainty, all of it. And a part of you is genuinely trying, but another part of you is running on emotional software from decades ago, still waiting for someone to just sit down next to you and say, "Hey, I see you." Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly, a little uncomfortable. Because most people, when they hear this, think, okay, so the solution is to find that person. Find a partner or a friend or a therapist who finally gives you that comfort. And yes, relationships help, absolutely. But that's not actually the core of the healing. And if you don't understand why,
you'll keep unconsciously outsourcing your emotional well-being to other people, and then feeling devastated when they can't deliver. Not because they don't love you, but because no one person can retroactively give you what you needed at 8 years old.
The healing has to come from inside. And I know how that sounds. It sounds like one of those things people say on Instagram over a sunset photo. But stay with me, because the science behind it is genuinely fascinating. There's a concept in psychology called reparenting, and it's not as abstract as it sounds. The idea is rooted in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new pathways at any age. Dr. Kristin Neff, a researcher at the University of Texas, has done some of the most rigorous studies on self-compassion that exist, and her findings are striking. When people consistently practice treating themselves with the same kindness they would offer a close friend in pain, same tone, same gentleness, same non-judgment, measurable changes start happening. Stress hormones drop. The nervous system begins to regulate differently. Emotional reactivity decreases.
The brain, it turns out, doesn't always know the difference between receiving comfort from someone else and giving it to yourself. If you do it genuinely, consistently, with full presence, it responds to the act of comfort itself. But here's the thing most people skip, and this is important. Self-compassion is not self-pity. It's not lying in bed telling yourself you've had it the hardest. Dr. Neff's research is very clear on this distinction. Self-compassion has 3 specific components. Mindfulness, actually acknowledging that you're in pain without over-dramatizing or denying it. Common humanity, recognizing that suffering and falling short is part of the shared human experience, not a personal defect. And self-kindness, actively choosing warmth toward yourself instead of harsh judgment. Most people skip the first one. They don't let themselves actually feel what they feel. They go straight to problem solving or distraction or criticism. Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Just get it together. But that internal critic, that voice, is not actually your friend. Even when it sounds logical, even when it sounds motivating. Research from Dr. Paul Gilbert at the University of Derby shows that self-criticism activates the same threat system in the brain as external danger. It puts you into fight or flight, and you can't heal from a place of threat. You can only brace. So when you're in pain, genuine pain, the kind you can't Instagram away, and you turn inward with harshness, you're not getting stronger. You're just adding a second wound on top of the first. Now, I want to be really honest about something, because I think people deserve honesty more than they deserve comfort that doesn't help. Doing this work is not easy. It doesn't feel natural at first. For a lot of people, the first time they try to speak to themselves gently, to actually say to themselves, "This is really hard, and it makes sense that I'm struggling," it feels fake. It might feel deeply uncomfortable. Some people feel nothing. Some people actually feel angry. And that resistance, that discomfort, it's actually data. It's the part of you that learned early on that softness is dangerous, that needing things leads to disappointment, that it's safer to be hard. And that makes complete sense given what you went through, but it is not serving you anymore. There's a study I find incredibly moving. In the 1980s, psychologist Mary Main developed what's called the adult attachment interview. She would sit with adults and ask them to reflect on their childhood experiences, particularly around comfort and emotional support. And one of the most significant findings was this: the single best predictor of a person's emotional health and relationship quality as an adult was not whether they had a perfect childhood. It was whether they had developed what she called a coherent narrative, meaning whether they could reflect on their experiences honestly, connect cause and effect, and hold their past with some degree of understanding, rather than either denial or complete overwhelm. In other words, the most healing thing you can do is not erase your story. It's to understand it, to look at where the gaps were,
Not with bitterness, not with performance, but with a kind of clear-eyed, compassionate curiosity. This is what happened. This is how it shaped me. And I can choose something different now. That choosing, that active daily choosing, is what reparenting actually looks like in practice. It might look like noticing when you're exhausted and actually resting instead of pushing through and then collapsing. It might look like sitting with your own sadness for 5 minutes without immediately texting someone or turning on a screen. It might look like speaking to yourself after a mistake the way you would speak to someone you genuinely love. That didn't go well. That's okay. Let's figure out what happened and try again. It might look like asking for help, and this is a big one. Not because you've run out of options, but because you've decided your needs are worth voicing. Because the version of you that learned to be very small and very self-sufficient and very fine, that version learned that lesson in a specific context, a context that no longer exists. You are not 8 years old anymore. You don't have to earn your right to be tended to. And here's something worth sitting with. A lot of the ways people chase comfort as adults, the overworking, the people-pleasing, the numbing, the constant need for validation, the inability to sit in silence, these aren't character flaws. They are creative solutions that an earlier version of you came up with when the real thing wasn't available. When proper comfort wasn't on the table, you found the closest substitute, and you survived because of it. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. But survival mode and thriving are not the same thing. And there comes a point, and maybe you're at that point right now, where you're ready to do more than survive. There's this researcher at Harvard named Robert Waldinger. He's been leading what is arguably the longest study on human well-being ever conducted, over 80 years, tracking hundreds of people across their entire adult lives. And when asked what the data most clearly shows about what makes people genuinely well, not just functional, not just successful, his answer is always some version of the same thing: warmth. Genuine felt warmth. In your relationships, yes, but also within yourself. The people who age well, who stay mentally sharp, who report the deepest sense of meaning, they are not the ones who are hardest on themselves. They are the ones who learned, somehow, somewhere along the way, to be gentle with their own experience. That gentleness is not weakness. It is not naivety. It is not giving yourself a pass on everything. It is the foundation on which real change is actually built. So, if you've been carrying something for a long time, some version of yourself that got hurt and never got held, I want you to know something. It is not too late. The brain stays plastic. The body stays responsive. The nervous system can still learn. You can still learn. Not to pretend the past didn't happen, not to suddenly feel fine about things that weren't fine, but to become slowly the person who shows up for yourself. The one who says, finally, genuinely, I've got you. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to stop pretending you don't need anything. Because that part of you, the one nobody ever comforted, it has been waiting, and it doesn't need much. It just needs you to stop walking past it. That's worth everything. If something in this felt like it was speaking directly to you, if you found yourself thinking about something you haven't thought about in years, that means something. Don't rush past it. Sit with it a little. And if you want to keep exploring things like this, the psychology of how we're shaped, how we heal, and how we can genuinely build a better inner life, subscribe. Not because of an algorithm, but because this kind of conversation doesn't happen enough, and you clearly came here looking for something real. So stay. There's more where this came from.